Hello there to another Techalyzer video. I'm with you today with an interesting subject. I was discussing on a random video I had in my subscriptions with someone about the efficiency of a very old style of house building, at least here around Eastern Europe, of what you have is basically mud houses with just uh, basically just mud, sometimes mixed with manure, and then applied to what's mostly like modern American houses, a wooden frame that's used to actually support the house, and then straws or little pieces of wood, little planks, or it depends on various styles, just to keep the dirt in place as an insulation. This is not me, by the way. It's just a random photo I took from Google. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to anyway. It's just a random guy. I don't think he's a celebrity or something, so I don't think there's gonna be an issue there. One thing about these houses is that the I don't even want to call this technology because it's I mean in a historical way it can be, but they are it's basically just mud on sticks, and for what it is, if you get to stay in one for a while, preferably during different seasons, you'll notice that sometimes it can be better than a house or building that was built like 2 months ago. The insulation in these things, both acoustic and thermal, are absolutely insane. In the middle of and I'm sorry about you Americans, I'm not using Fahrenheit, in a 40 degrees summer, which is scorching hot. I don't know what it is. 40 degrees, something like over 100 Fahrenheit, something somewhere around that value. You enter one of these houses. Bear in mind that these are in locations that most of the time, some of them don't even have electricity. I mean, well, most of them by now, but that's the most you're gonna get into an area like this. There's no sewage, there's no running water. You take your water from the well like they used to 100 years ago. So you're not gonna have air conditioning. Of course, you can buy one, but it's usually not something you see. Not because there won't be money, because even though sometimes it's a symbol of poor people, a lot of people living in these houses can actually afford like a cheap AC unit. But the thing is, you don't actually need it. You go from outside in one of these houses in the middle of the summer, in the middle of a sunny day, where you've been, sweating and working all day long, you're gonna freeze. You're gonna freeze. I had to put some clothes on in order to take a nap in the afternoon. They are absolutely amazing, and it was one of these talks. Then, well, maybe I should. I tried to use my. Maybe I should use the camera as well. Let's see. I have 3 screens on my desk, so whoop. Yeah, that's me. Let me just. Hi, I'm Techalyzer. It was this discussion that I don't want to see that. Okay. Sometimes the efficiency of very old things, very old. Where am I supposed to have the camera? Is that alright? Okay. A very old technology is sometimes at least the same or even better as stuff we use today. So A lot of the times, don't get me wrong, I mean, of course, we're not using 1920s electronics anymore. I mean, we have computers and the cars that, even there's a little bit of discussion because lately cars are crap. Um, I don't advocate against technological advance, but some things that are so old are actually so good that there's no need to go further. That's what it is. Of course, as you see in the image, is there's a problem with the durability. But come on, if you're not someone who can't put a screw into a plank, uh, it's not something that's gonna happen every year. Probably once every 10 years, there's gonna be like a 10-inch piece falling off, and then instead of having to save all this money on construction materials and workers and all the industry that has been developed nowadays with insulation and layers and cements and silicons and so many things that not even I can fully understand what most of them do, and without actually using them. It's just a simple matter of fact of going into the back of your yard and grab a handful of dirt and slap it on. It's You don't need it. It's something that comes from those times when there wasn't this whole business of offering things to people that already exist in nature. Of course, in the cities, you're not gonna go like 20 stories up high with mud, duh, of course. But these areas with this kind of houses is really the place where I'd still see this happening, and a lot of them still are there. Probably this guy in the photo is just there to repair the house. I don't know. Um, so then I go further to what have I done? I knew I wasn't gonna blow it. So this is what I'm talking about. This is how it's made. It's a structure of wooden beams, not beans. Um, most of them not even not even prepared to look like a plank or a square, just pure straight trees that have been dried out. It really doesn't matter because all you go for is the structural integrity. There's nothing um, that's gonna stick out to influence the general aspect. Of course, the walls are gonna be a bit wavy if you do this. Of course, you can go with square planks, square beams. There's no problem in that. Uh, as you can see, and I think that most Americans, if they're watching this, it's the standard system. You get like the horizontal beams that will support the roof, then you get the vertical beams that take all the weight, some diagonal ones to distribute, the loads, um, and then just tiny horizontal ones to be able to hold on to all the dirt that's gonna be uh, placed as a wall. So all that the dirt does is simply give now insulation and to divide the house into the rooms. It has no structural ability. It's doesn't make any sense that it would. Um, the wood beams do all of that structural things, and the mud just is there just to separate the rooms and to offer insulation. It's not just mud, it's the main ingredient. It's mixed with straws, with hay, and also manure. I'm not sure what the latter does. Um, I'm not gonna go into every detail because, of course, I've lived in the city my whole life and I don't really know all the proportions and all the secrets and all that. Even though once we move to the countryside, because that's what we want to do, we are so sick and tired of this city, and I also have asthma, and with all the landfills burning and all the pollution and cars and diesels, and it's really bad. And in this age, you know, with working online, it's not really a problem anymore. Yeah, but anyway, living in a city so far, I haven't got a chance to really uh, have any real experience with it, but I can tell you basically what it is. So that's that. That's how it's built. Of course, you can see the walls are a bit wavy. As I told you, if you want to have a better look for your house, you can go with the. Of course, this image is from a wall that was probably built somewhere like anywhere between 100 and 200 years ago. So there's probably not much of a square plank industry back then, you know. But now you can just go to any construction shop and just buy your square planks to make it look better, you know. Another thing to notice is that you can clearly see this in both pictures. It's not supposed to be like the, as I said, it's like the insulation. Even nowadays, you have the insulation and then the plywood, and you go with plaster and paint on top of the plywood. It's just meant as an internal um, component of the walls. You don't get to have mud around you inside the house. You go on and level it with plaster. You make it as level as you want to be, as any other wall out there, being either being wood or concrete or brick or whatever. You just flatten it out, hide everything that's behind it. You can see here, actually this is the first time I see it. Um, it's sometimes you kind of have to improvise, you know, or given that these are very old structures, you know, you can put some rebar here and there, you know, and improvise. By the way, this is by the looks of it not an actual house. It's more like a barn or something like that, uh, which is why most of them, you know, people tend to not repair it to make it look perfect, because you're not living there anyway, and especially if they're low on resources, they don't go over and uh, make a big deal over repairing and making these things look nice. They just keep them standing. Uh, so yeah, just plaster it and then apply whatever paint you want over the plaster, like you would paint any other wall. And if you do the leveling right and everything, you don't even know what's behind. So you can see here a house that's probably being built, or maybe I don't know. Judging by the roof, this is freshly built. So you can see, ignoring like this side on the right, uh, you don't get a clue on what's going on behind the walls. And we can clearly see that this is a house that's been built recently. I mean, in the 2000s, you know, in our millennium. Uh, you can clearly see this is freshly built. You see these bright colors for the gutters, and um, it doesn't even have the drains installed all the way down. Probably that's what it's intended to do. Just have the rain drop uh, from here. I'm really supposed to show you things with the mouse because you can't see me pointing on the screen. Uh, all this plywood, you can see these are brand new pieces of wood that have just been placed there. Haven't even noticed this when I first grabbed this picture. It's quite amazing because it looks like, or maybe it's just being rebuilt. Maybe the bottom side is the old. I don't know. But as I said, it's no problem. It can be built as a new house. I can see the structure, you know, and the thin pieces of wood just offering support for the mud, and then the thick beams on top supporting the roof here. Uh, And you can go modern style, like with flat surfaces or like double pane windows and all that. There's no problem. As I said, you use it as anything else. Concrete is basically the same thing. It's something uh, squishy, liquidy, like a paste that you mix with the rebar. Instead, we have mud and sticks. So it's more or less the same thing. Or you can go in this style, which is absolutely amazing. I swear, if I ever have the chance to do this, and maybe if my wife has a minute, because she works from home, look what you can do with a new house from, the classical modern sticks walls. They decided instead of the classical square style to go, with the fairy tale kind of house. This is the outside. That's absolutely mesmerizing, and you can clearly see besides the fairy tale kind of aspect, it's pretty modern. You have these lights. You have a garage for your car. I mean, it's not definitely not the house of poor people. It's just gutters, rain gutters. You have here draining all the rain and roof windows, and yeah. I can't tell if this one is completely built out of mud, but there wouldn't be a problem. And there's just something about this. Just imagine that instead of it's a little bit minimalistic, I think you can call it nowadays. Instead of all this crap nowadays that you need, I don't know, the toaster that has a short plug, and then you need an extension cord for the toaster, and then a table to put it on, and then the tiles to put the table on, and so on and so forth. Those were the times when you just went ahead and kind of integrated everything into the same thing. You had the stove that had a flat surface where you also cook and baked, like a small oven, which is probably what this thing here is. It was all kind of integrated into that cooking wall part of the kitchen. Also, if you build a mud house, it's also a lot better during the summer and the winter. Yes, that's what I talked about, the insulation, that it's absolutely amazing, sometimes even better than modern materials. Yeah. Okay, go back to work now. Go give me some money. um, yeah, so the possibilities are there. It's really amazing. As I said, it's one of those things that are ancient and can still be used nowadays, and there's no problem, and probably will be used forever until the end of our civilization, which might be sooner or later. We don't know. Um, Here you can see I found this picture rather interesting because it's like a full section through an old house. Obviously, no one living there, just either abandoned or going to be torn down. As I said, the beams you can see supporting everything. Um, I'm not sure about earthquakes, but I think they can take quite a lot of movement, can they? Hmm? The earthquakes, I think they're pretty good in earthquakes too. Because I think that's what you have back at home. Yeah, right? Well, there are. I mean, it's a bigger earthquake. Yes, cracks, but it didn't fall down. No, no. It went through the 1977 big one? Yeah, and the 40 something one. Oh, so it's and the 91. It's almost 90 years old, the house. Yeah, last and century we had two major earthquakes. The last one in 1977 wasn't. It was big, but it wasn't uh, quite as much as our seismic area can give. Because if you don't know, it's not the Richter scale anymore now. It's the moment magnitude, and goes up like this. It's logarithmic. So the more you go towards the higher degrees, the bigger the difference you have between even smaller steps, like the difference between 5.1 and 5.2 is minuscule compared to the one between 8 and 8.1. Um, so we had that in 1977 and another one in 1940, which was somewhere around 7.7, 7.8, which is quite as bad as it sounds. I remember my grandfather, one of my grandfathers, telling me that there was those chandeliers in the rooms with an oil lamp because there was no electricity there back then, um, and the movement was so powerful that it kept slamming against the ceiling, not the walls, and it drew a perfect circle, as it circled around in the ceiling. It was almost as if the house had turned upside down and the chandelier was doing some uh, breakdancing on the ceiling. That was the new floor. Uh, Pretty impressive. And yeah, they can take that because one of the biggest problems with constructing things to withstand earthquakes is the ability to be flexible. And as you can see in these things, there's not much, not many elements fixed. I mean, it can move slightly under the movement of the ground. So that is a big problem. The moment you see a construction that feels is very solid, say you get a solid piece of concrete, just slam it 100 feet into the ground, that's when you're gonna have a problem, because instead of having the building slowly bending uh, during the earthquake, you're gonna have all that force against the rigid surface, and that's where it breaks and falls. So you have all these articulated joints basically right here, where the sticks come in contact with the beams on the roof, on the ground, because there's nothing underneath. These things sit on the ground. It's like a container slammed onto the ground. Maybe the supporting vertical sticks are pushed through the ground a bit to offer some kind of stability, but either way, the wood is still flexible and it flexes under the weight. So uh, they are really great for that too. And most of these, like this one, have been, uh, or this one, through that earthquake. Not necessarily an aftermath of that earthquake. As you can see here in the picture, actually, this is something that happened much later, probably due to uh, heavy rain, or you can see there's a bad portion of the roof there. So yeah, if it's done right, I mean, if you have the workforce and um, all the knowledge about this, it's not gonna look like this. You can make a house that can look like this, that is perfectly insulated both during the winter and the summer. Actually, I went to my father-in-law's, my in-laws have one of these houses. They moved in like about 2 years ago into the new home. Yeah. And there wasn't much heating during winter there. I mean, just a tiny little stove. It was like I don't know, somewhere up to my hips. So uh, something like you see here, exactly about this size. And it got so hot that I had to undress like in pants off, just with a t-shirt. No way I was still gonna be able to put to keep my blanket on me, and I had to actually kind of sleep with the legs outside the bed and hanging at the edge of the bed towards the floor so I can cool them off. So it was like, I think somewhere around 30 degrees Celsius in the middle of winter there. I think it was around Christmas. Um, so yeah, absolutely no modern solution. There's no uh, insulation, no air conditioning, absolutely nothing, nothing at all. Just uh, a few pieces of wood burning in the stove and the house itself. So that's a great piece of history. Of course, there are advantages and disadvantages. It's more prone to humidity. That's unfortunately one of my biggest problems because I'm allergic to mold. I also have asthma, and uh, indeed these kind of buildings have a problem with that because even though the insulation is great, they tend to draw the humidity out of the ground. But again, if you kind of combine some modern solutions, because I don't see why not. You can make like a water sealed foundation with the modern concrete and dig that trench around the house to let all the water drain, and then you go up and build it like this. So there must be a solution to anything, because even modern houses, if you just slam it on the ground, you're gonna get the same result. Water is gonna um, seep into the walls, and in a year or two you're gonna have no matter what paint you choose, you're still gonna have green walls. uh, Another picture I found interesting. This is absolutely remarkable actually, um, and I've never seen anything like it. This is actually a hay bale house, so there's nothing in this. um, I see some metal nets, probably to keep them compacted into the form of the wall, then you just go plaster over it and it's the same thing, uh, basically. Yeah, so really interesting to know, things like most of the things of those times are old and long forgotten, and for good reason, but some of them stick with us today. I mean, the diode, the transistor have been invented like I don't know how many decades ago, probably even a century, and they're still the base of the most advanced technology we use today. That was it for this video. Thanks for watching. Click a like, click a subscribe, and I'll see you next time.